If you have ever been along the coastlines of rural Britain, you may have noticed odd-looking installations miles from anywhere surrounded by high fences topped with barbed wire. You may even have taken a moment to reflect on what goes on behind those fences and in the buildings and structures within. That's exactly what two boys, Ryan Alfonso and Oscar Lomax, were contemplating as they walked along the beach on a winter's night in November. The fog was thick as it rolled inland from the sea, and visibility was no more than 2 or 3 yards in every direction. The sea gently caressed the sea wall that ran along a length of the beach, hidden by the high tide, and that separated it from the deserted caravan park in the midst of seasonal shutdown. The chilly, tranquil night air was broken with the sound of the two boys' pounding feet and mischievous laughter. Oscar, aged 11, and Ryan, aged 10, emerged from the gloom at a canter, goading each other, Oscar, the bigger of the two boys, more so.
Go on, wussy boy, I dare ya!
Ryan tried to put on a front.
I can't see nothing, I'll fall in.
I told you, you're a chicken shit.
Oscar grinned. Ryan jumped onto the seawall and precariously walked along it. He slipped, nearly lost his footing, but just managed to jump off the right side of the wall and onto the walkway. Oscar laughed. Ryan was visibly relieved. He caught his breath.
See, Oscar, I'm the man.
Prove it.
I'm the school cross-country champion.
Doesn't mean shit,
replied Oscar.
Prove you're not a chicken shit, Ryan.
Ryan stopped dead. He knew exactly what Oscar meant and shook his head. No way. There was no way he was going to do what Oscar was suggesting, and he told him as much. But Oscar was older and bigger and knew precisely how to get his own way. A high wire fence encircled the circumference of the imposing ex-military installation as Oscar and Ryan tried to peer inside through the fencing, but the fog enshrouded virtually everything, making the already menacing-looking structures seem malignant.
I'll get shot if I go in there.
Ryan was shaking.
Pussy.
Oscar said venomously.
But
it's not a US air base anymore.
Oscar smiled. During the Second World War, the installation had been used as a US air base for daylight bombing raids into Dresden and Berlin, and then during the Cold War, it had housed all sorts of classified strike capability that not even the British government had known about. Now, though still working for the American government, it had been outsourced to a private scientific research organization, Van Cleef Laboratories, for exploration into genetic modification. It was naturally accepted it was the genetic modification of foodstuffs, but exactly what was never made clear and was only talked about on a need-to-know basis. Ryan was scared witless as he spied the eerie, obtuse facility, his imagination running riot at the thoughts at what lay behind the fog within the installation. Oscar eyed Ryan triumphantly.
I don't know why you're worried. My brother Casper reckons he's been in there, and it's just a lot of plants and stuff.
yeah, but your brother always tells big stonking lies.
I'll tell him you said that.
Ryan immediately regretted saying it. Casper, Oscar's brother, was known for being someone you don't want to cross.
Don't tell him, he'll kick the shit out of me.
Good!
But
well, don't be a pussy then,
said Oscar.
Come on, Casper showed me a way in.
Ryan reluctantly followed Oscar along the outer fence of the installation, disappearing into the thick, foreboding fog. Deep within the bowels of the facility, in an underground section, Dr. Robert Schoonderbeck, 52, a small, wiry man with a shock of grey-tinged hair, was carefully analysing data collated in reference to the small containment box sat on a work surface in front of him. Dr. Sarah Dana, his long-serving assistant, 35 brunette, worked alongside him, looking into a microscope.
What do you think?
Schoonderbeck ventured. Dana kept her focus on the slide of the microscope.
Unless we can locate the malfunction.
Unserviceable?
Dana let out a sigh.
Well, I don't see how you can get around it.
There's always a way, Schoonderbeck insisted. Dana looked up from the microscope and stared at Schoonderbeck. She had long since felt this had become an unhealthy obsession with the older doctor, and she was beginning to feel the need to suppress her assumption that Schoonderbeck's perception of reality was becoming warped.
I don't see how.
She replied.
Nor do I at the moment. But you'd be surprised how things suddenly just click into place,
said Schoonderbeck. She pondered, humoring him just for a moment, but her compulsion to tell it exactly how she saw it got the better of her.
I wish you were right, but that's not always the case, as you know all too well.
You're too cynical, Sarah.
Not at all, Robert. This always was a long shot.
But well worth the risk, don't you think?
Only if it works.
Neither of the doctors noticed it at first, but the red warning light in the corner of the laboratory started to flash. It was quickly followed by the blare of a klaxon, and finally, when an unused computer screen came to life, Schoonderbeck glared at it. At first, he could not believe what he was seeing, and then, with the realization of the situation, it finally sank in.
Shit!
He grabbed the phone. Daniel Kidd was the archetypal organizational operations manager, 45, focused, motivated, with short, cropped blonde hair, toned, muscular body, and totally devoid of any humor. The particular lady he had decided that would share his hotel bed through the night thought her luck had been in when Kidd had chatted up at the hotel bar, but was in reality just a way of him breaking the monotony of commuting to one of the Van Cleef Corporation's many UK installations that Kidd was temporarily overseer to. When Kidd's mobile phone started to ring during an energetic session of copulation, he showed his total control of any given situation by immediately ejaculating, grabbing her by the hair, and pulling her off him and to one side. He then answered the phone.
Yes. When? I'll be right over. Give me 10.
The young lady was catching her breath.
I do like it rough.
She smiled.
Good,
said Kidd, as he kicked her out of the bed and onto the floor with a thud.
What the hell's wrong with you?
You said you liked it rough. I've got to go to work.
I'll wait for you.
No, you won't. You'll leave the way you came. Don't call me, text me, WhatsApp me, or any other shit like that.
I don't have your number.
Good.
The woman dressed quickly.
Fine.
Close the door on the way out.
Fine. By the way, you're a shite shag.
Kidd laughed.
It hit the spot for me.
She left, slamming the door. Kidd smiled smugly as he dressed. The locker room of the local town police station was small, but functional and big enough to service the man force attributed to the catchment area reaching up to the coast. Ray Poskett was in his late 40s, of stocky build, and was putting the finishing touches to his preparation for his night shift on duty. Checking his watch, he flicked off the light switch and left the male locker room almost in perfect unison with WPC Jodie Loxley as she exited the female locker room.
Are you lost, Miss Loxley?
No, Kathy's called in sick.
Ray did not try to hide his obvious annoyance.
You're joking?
Sorry, I know the feeling's mutual.
Poskett pushed through the fire door into the reception area, not making any attempt to hold the door open for Jodie. The dislike between the pair was tangible. As they left the station and made their way to the Ford Focus with the single word emblazoned, police, Jodie could not contain herself.
I see your attitude has improved.
Ray opened the driver's side door.
Well, make the most of it, 'cause it's only gonna get worse the longer I spend with you.
Yes, and fuck you too.
She opened the passenger door and slipped into her seat. Ray slammed his door and fired the car into action. Daniel Kidd stood with the hard copy of a report in his hand and look of controlled disgust on his face.
This was only supposed to be a feasibility study, not carte blanche to indulge your sordid little fantasies.
Dr. Robert Schoonderbeck stood facing Kidd inside the spacious office. His assistant, Dr. Sarah Dana, stood to his left, and the security officers, J. Harris, 35, a tall, thick-set ex-US Marine from Texas, standing next to Norman Black, a thin but muscle-toned 42-year-old ex-Missouri state trooper, as they stood defiantly against the back wall near the exit door. Schoonderbeck disliked Kidd intensely. He was a typical company man who never understood the complexities of his work.
Too good an opportunity to pass up.
Really?
The ironic tone in Kidd's voice was evident.
Do you have any idea?
Bollocks. Do you have any idea how much shit will be flying about if any of our major shareholders ever found out about this? How far along was the research?
Dr. Schoonderbeck and Dr. Sarah Dana shared a look.
Advanced.
About 90%.
Kidd sent the report in his hand, flying across the office, narrowly missing Jay Harris. Harris did not move or say a word, just glared. Kidd glared back.
Got a problem, Harris?
Harris said nothing.
I want all remaining research destroyed.
Destroyed?
Dr. Schoonderbeck was shaking with rage. Kidd noticed and suppressed a satisfied grin.
And incinerated.
If you don't mind me saying.
Kidd cut Schoonderbeck short again. He showed a curt, dismissive disrespect to anything Schoonderbeck had to say. "Piss off, you old twat," he mused to himself, and then said, stern-faced out loud,
This is a total and utter waste of company time, money and resources, and is a totally incompetent, dangerous, irresponsible, unauthorized project.
But this is groundbreaking research.
I don't give a shit. You don't work for the government anymore, Schoonderbeck. This is a profit-making organization, and you do not the authority to fuck about with company resources in this manner. You are paid to do what you are told when you are told, and that goes for all of you.
Nothing to do with us,
said Black.
You must have known about it, and known it was not in your remit.
We're just security officers,
said Harris.
Yes, and all security officers were sent a memo by email last year to report all such unauthorized and unusual breaches of protocol.
Black shrugged.
I didn't see no email, sir.
Kidd's tone rose a notch.
Well, you both signed it off as being read.
Harris and Black shared a look. Harris shrugged and Black claimed ignorance. Kidd glared.
So what happened?
Schoonderbeck cared little for Kidd's school bully attitude.
The electrified barriers around the compound were tripped.
Hardly surprising, considering that's not what they were designed for.
Harris rubbed his forehead and ran his hand through his hair to avoid looking directly at Kidd.
They were 'cause we checked them. Some kids.
Black looked incredulously at Harris, his first thought being, well done, dipshit, you've dropped us right in it.
Oh, right. So you knew about this all along, did you?
He glared at Dr. Dana.
I have to say I'm surprised and disappointed about you, Sarah.
But Dr. Schoonderbeck is my immediate superior, sir.
Do you always do as you're asked by your superiors, Sarah?
Of course.
She smiled.
So what are we talking here? Worst case scenario?
The potential hazard area is no more than a 3-mile radius.
We can put up road closed signs up.
No one will notice they're always closing roads for roadworks around here.
Scramble all the communications. Give us time to neutralize the outbreak.
All being well.
Black said hopefully.
All being well. Ladies and gentlemen, if this mess is not cleared up by the first knockings of morning twilight, your employment will be terminated immediately. So all being well is not an option.
Daniel Kidd grabbed his briefcase from the desk and looked at his watch.
I estimate this gives you till 6 o'clock.
He stormed out without another word. A mile from the installation on the top of a small rise opposite the local woods were 2 old council houses. One was vacant, awaiting renovation, and the other was the abode of the Alfonso family. Lauren Alfonso was 15, going on 18, and just finished making a cup of warm drinking chocolate for her and her brother Ryan. She liked to be protective of Ryan, and right now he was shivering uncontrollably, even with the blanket she had got him draped over his shoulders and the electric storage heater on full. She handed Ryan his cup and adjusted his blanket.
Are you still cold?
Ryan said nothing, he just stared into space. It was totally dark outside, and the fog appeared to be getting thicker, if that was possible, by the minute. Lauren drew the curtains and grabbed the phone from its cradle. Dialing a number, she turned to Ryan.
Why don't you just tell me what happened, Ryan?
Ryan shrugged. Lauren grabbed the phone tighter to her ear as her call was answered.
Hello, Mum. It's Lauren.
Keely Alfonso was in her early 40s, well-groomed and gave off the air of someone was happy in her own skin, but if you scratched beneath the surface, the insecurities would chip away at her self-esteem. She approached the main doors to the care home and another dreaded night shift when she'd answered her phone.
What's wrong, sweetheart? I can't be long. I'm at work now.
It's Ryan. I think he's coming down with something.
Well, where's your dad?
Gone to the garage to get some Calpol. Ryan can't stop shaking Mum.
Oh, Christ. That's all I bloody need. Look, honey, I have to do handover. I promise I'll ring you in 10 minutes. I promise.
Okay, Mum.
Lauren placed the phone back in its holder and turned to the shaken Ryan.
You okay?
He didn't answer. He just stared into space.
Come on, Dad, where are you?
Lauren said under her breath. Her father, Javier Alfonso, 54, tanned and with an addiction for mirrors, perused the medical shelf of the small petrol station garage that doubled for a village shop.
Have you Calpol?
Tony Rands, an aging, semi-retired gentleman, complete with 70s footballer comb-over, studied Javier with mild amusement.
Yes, I believe we have. Have you been on your holidays, Mr. Alfonso?
Why do you ask that?
Just inquiring, sir.
Tony grabbed the purple boxed medication from the shelf and scanned it.
It's amazing what one can get from a bottle these days.
And what is that supposed to mean?
Calpol, sir, paracetamol for children, sir. Amazing. I only wish we had something like that when I was a lad.
Javier grabbed the box from Tony without commenting.
Is this for fevers?
Without reading the box, sir, I wouldn't be sure, sir. I am only a mere assistant, not a pharmaceutical expert.
Obviously.
Tony was immune to customers looking down their noses at him. He was too tired to care and too experienced to be offended. Wayne Holton was a young autistic lad in his early 20s who liked to visit the garage on occasion to stand and talk to Tony. It was rare for Wayne to find a person who would engage with him in a respectful manner and not just simply dismiss him as a backward boy to be avoided. Wayne just wanted to be treated like everybody else, and he liked Tony. He looked forward to having a chat to Tony when he was on shift in the garage and would often walk to the garage to see if Tony was working, and even on a night like this, with the fog reducing visibility to a few meters, he'd put on his fluorescent jacket and brave the conditions just on the off chance for a chat with Tony. As he opened the shop door, he noticed Tony behind the counter and smiled instantly.
Hello, Wayne. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, Tony.
Javier took his eyes off the box instructions and eyed Wayne dismissively and then returned to reading the label.
What time are you open till?
Wayne was quick to interject.
10 o'clock. It's always 10 o'clock, except on Sundays when it's 8 o'clock.
Javier stared at Wayne for a moment.
Okay, thank you.
It is 10 o'clock, isn't it, Tony?
Tony smiled.
Yes, you're spot on, Wayne, as always.
Javier placed the box on the counter.
Yes. Well, I may be back. My son is ill, you see. In the meantime, can I have 20 of your budget-priced cigarettes and a half bottle of whiskey, please?
That'll cure him.
Javier noted Tony's sarcasm, but did not appreciate it.
They are for me.
Tony scanned the cigarettes and whiskey, gave Wayne a sly smile while Javier wasn't looking, and placed the items in a bag.
I may well be back for the Calpol.
10 o'clock,
offered Wayne again. Javier glared at Wayne, not realizing it was an element of his condition to repeat things, but instead taking Wayne's eagerness to please as a sign of him making fun of Javier.
Yes, I know.
Javier took his bag and made to leave.
I may be back.
Opening the door, he disappeared into the thick fog.
Thanks for warning us. Don't rush back.
Tony offered the wanker sign as Javier's car revved off the forecourt. Wayne was unable to understand the nuance of irony or sarcasm of Tony's.
He's not a very nice man, is he, Tony?
No, but who are we to judge our fellow man, Wayne?
Wayne pondered our Tony's comment for a moment.
But you think he's a wanker?
What on earth made you think that, Wayne?
Because my dad always makes that sign and shouts, "Wanker," when someone pulls out in front of his truck.
Inside the restroom of the research laboratory, Dr. Schoonderbeck, Dr. Sarah Dana, Jensen Harris, and Norman Black were in the midst of a heated discussion. Black was more than a little frustrated with his security colleague.
What the hell's wrong with you, man?
Harris shook his head with equal frustration. He always thought Black was a prick, but he was excelling himself today.
It ain't always about money. There's a goddamn principle here.
Yeah, well, 2 tours of Iraq and 1 of Afghanistan kind of knocks any principles a guy has out of the ballpark, man.
Harris laughed mockingly.
Yeah, like you had any goddamn principles in the first place.
Black glared.
Fuck you, man.
Schoonderbeck hated having to work with Neanderthals like Black and Harris, but they were a necessary evil he needed right at this very moment.
We have a buyer lined up already,
he interjected, bored with the inane squabbling.
No one else in the company knows about it apart from us 4. Sarah's meeting them later tonight. It's a lot of money.
Dr. Sarah Dana nodded in acknowledgement. Schoonderbeck continued,
We just need the research specimen alive.
Which might be easier said than done.
Tony unwrapped another case of cigarettes and placed them inside the cabinet. Wayne stood the other side of the counter, staring out of the window at the thick fog.
Foggy tonight, Tony.
Wayne said.
Yes, it is very.
Tony stopped what he was doing and looked towards Wayne. There were times when Tony was overwhelmed by the innocence and vulnerability of a young man like Wayne and could never decide if being autistic was a curse or a blessing. Maybe it was better not to try and make sense of the cutthroat, conniving, unfair, and at times cruel world around us, even if it did make one open to the opportunistic elements of society.
Watch yourself walking home tonight, Wayne. Or is your dad picking you up?
I'm not sure. I have my fluorescent jacket just in case.
Good thinking.
The sound of a rough old diesel van could be heard pulling onto the fog, shrouded forecourt. A wide grin broke out onto Wayne's face. He knew the sound of his dad's van anywhere. Wayne's broad grin made Tony smile.
Is that your dad now, Wayne?
He's been working late.
George Holton was in his late 50s, a bull of a man, and doted on Wayne even more than ever since his wife and Wayne's mum had died of cancer 2 years previous. He burst through the door and held his hand high in the air in recognition of all the shop's occupants.
Hello, Wayne. Hello, Tone.
Dad.
Good evening, George.
Foggy tonight, Tone.
George bellowed from the back of the shop as he browsed a row of ready-to-eat pies. Tony smiled as he mused to himself how alike George and his son were.
Yes, very, George.
Watch yourself walking home tonight, Wayne, or do you want me to give you a lift?
I don't mind, Dad. I've bought my fluorescent jacket, just in case.
Good boy.
George finally decided and grabbed 2 minced and onion pies from the rack.
Do you want one, Wayne?
No, thank you, Dad.
You had your tea, boy?
Yes, thank you, Dad.
Good boy.
George approached the counter and placed the pies down.
Been busy, Tone?
Tony scanned the pies through the till.
Not really. Fog's kept them at bay tonight.
Judging by the head case I just passed, not everybody.
It was not often Wayne joined in with a conversation, but when Wayne could think of something to say, he often seized his opportunity.
He wasn't a very nice man, was he, Tony?
No, Wayne, he wasn't.
Tony placed the pies into a paper bag as George handed over the money.
He was just in here a right miserable git, wasn't he, Wayne?
Yeah.
Blokes like him always come to no good. You can't drive around country lanes like that, especially at this time of the year. Too much mud on the road.
You are right, George.
I'll tell you something for nothing, Tony, my old mate. Mud on these roads with a bit of rain is bloody lethal.
Very true, George. Very true.
Jensen Harris picked up the tranquilizer rifle from the prep room table and felt the weight.
What's the plan then, Doc?
Find it with this.
Schoonderbeck pointed to motion tracker with a thermal imager.
It'll tell you in which sector it's in.
And the thermal imager will see through fog, right?
Added Black. Harris held up the rifle quizzically.
Disable it with that.
Schoonderbeck studied Harris as the security man opened the bolt action and looked down the barrel.
Does the ear...
Harris pointed to the thermal imager.
Does it attach to the rifle?
Yes, it is interchangeable with all the hardware.
Black picked up a handheld radio communicator and caught Schoonderbeck's attention.
Those have the only frequency available that's not scrambled,
said Schoonderbeck.
Contact me on those and I'll bring the transporter. We'll make a meet at the port in the morning and be out of the country by midday tomorrow.
Harris was less than convinced.
No one knows about this research apart from us and Kid,
added Schoonderbeck.
Yeah, and that limey prick's not going to admit to fucking up,
said Black. Harris looked at Black and then Schoonderbeck, and he mused to himself, what had he got himself into?
What bothers me is that limey prick cares more about our country's security than we seem to.
This is purely a last resort defensive research project.
Schoonderbeck handed a handset to Harris.
Designed in case a cyber attack or other disabling viral attack knocks out all digital computers. And Jensen, this is a private company that only cares about profit.
Like us, it seems.
And why not us?
There was an edge in Black's voice. He was fed up with Harris's continual bleating.
On the contrary, Harris.
Schoonderbeck was not happy about having to employ the dubious talents of these two, but needs must.
Shareholders' profits are paramount above everything. You heard what the man said. Terminate our employment. And terminate means terminate in such a delicate research field such as this. So this is our only option.
So what choice have we got, Bright Boy?
Black said acidly. Harris glared back. There'd be a time and a place for him to put Black in his place,